We might go live on YouTube instead.
Okay. It says live on YouTube right now.
Yeah.
And then you can just post it to Facebook.
Guess so.
That's fun. That's a goal of mine to figure out how to work all that stuff too, but I haven't got there yet.
Yeah, Zoom is a great tool. Okay, yeah. So we're live on YouTube. All right, let's do this.
All right. Good morning.
We'll figure Facebook out. I've got it on the gallery view, which I think is cool. So that way everybody can see both of us. Okay, well, hey friends, Eric Nevins here, and we are live on YouTube. I don't know if we'll get any comments. Maybe we will. If we do, we'd love to answer those. I'm here with my friend Jennifer Eikenhorst. Jennifer, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
It's
Good morning.
great to see you. We recorded an interview for Halfway There, and you were my special guest this week. I appreciate that. And then we got to meet a couple weeks ago at the Spark Christian Conference. That was wonderful. And you
So
won some
fun.
awards.
I
You won an award,
did.
yeah.
So humbled and so grateful. I won the Concept Award for
Very
2020. Yeah.
I love that. I was that. What were you feeling when you won? Like, what was that like for you?
Total shock, because we didn't know the categories. So, I heard something about female host. I was like, oh, it's okay. I didn't know that there was a Concept Award. So I was in shock that I won. And I was so grateful, to get to go next year. And I felt like I represented all the voices of people who don't, you never get to hear their story.
Yeah.
And so it was, I was ugly crying. I was trying to keep back the tears because it meant more than just an award. It meant that possibly people are opening their heart to people like me, and maybe there'll be research, or people can come forward, or that's what it felt like to me. So it's special.
You have a unique voice and a place, and so we talked about your story, and the term you use is caddy, right? So
and that's the clinical term. It's
okay.
causing accident. So, and a lot of people don't realize that. I mean, it is very much a clinical state, just like you would, personality disorder. I don't know why I picked that one first, or PTSD. But CADI is the clinical term, causing accidental death or injury. They've categorized or interviewed and researched enough people to where we have very close systematic responses and certain processes and grief that they can now research. It's an actual thing. Yeah.
So to hear that story, people can go listen to Halfway There. They can listen to your podcast, and they can hear the whole story about what happened and how that happened in your life. Here's what I want to talk about: is some of the things that happen as a result of that. Because you talked about how that's very sort of predictable, these kind of things. So, for instance, I just saw a tweet from somebody this morning who's a pastor who today was diagnosed with coronavirus. And so she's like, I probably exposed my entire congregation. I had to send them an email, right?
Yeah, the pain of that.
Feeling guilt. And I thought, that's not so dissimilar, right?
If one of them dies or gets hospitalized, she will probably very much follow the same symptoms as I did.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating? Like that's, I was like, oh, it's a different situation, but it's similar.
Oh, it's absolutely in my category. It's not just accidents, although that's the, mine was a car accident, and that's very much like the majority, I think. But it can be anywhere from, accidental gunshot in a hunting accident. I've heard of a canoeing accident where one person's decision caused another person to drown. My friend Dwayne Miller, he wrote a book about it. It's called Survivor. It's an excellent book if you want to read about him. And he just journaled his way through his recovery and that whole process of forgiving himself in the book Survivor. And, it's just a silly decision that he did at 17 that caused his cousin to drown.
Wow.
And a couple of other people. And and it was 26 before he came to grips with it, and 40 years later before he was able to write about it and share it with the world. I mean, it's a long suffering, and he's a pastor as well. Um, so it's not just an accident and car related. It could be something that like medical doctors go through when they lose a patient, but they're trained for it. So I think their mentality is a little bit different. I don't think it fractures quite. I mean, they have the weight of it for sure, because they're human, but they may not feel the same because it's not the shock of it, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So, what are some ways that people experiencing this can, um, can kind of help process through it? Because it sounds like, that kind of grief, that kind of, um, what's I'm looking for another word,
I mean, it's
sorrow.
psychological shock. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's well, the
hard to
first,
deal with.
just like any kind of sudden grief, there's shock. It is very much like shell shock. You're not really completely all together. Your brain is still trying to understand what happened. My brain was trying to understand, why did this happen? Is this really real? It feels like an alternate universe. Like you're there and you're going through the motions, but you don't feel um, like everything's real. Like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna wake up and it'll be over. That
Mm.
this is your new reality. Um, I think the first thing is knowing that really they won't be able to do it. It needs to be a support system around you. So I share this because you
Yeah.
might have someone who has this accident and then it's deemed not their fault. So then you can say, "Oh, it wasn't your fault. This was just an accident," to that pastor. You
Yeah.
had no idea you had symptoms. You would have never done this intentionally. You can say that till you're blue in the face. It takes a support system to say, hey, let's get us to some help. Let's get us to some professional help. Let's get a PTSD certified or experienced counselor. Um, really is what you need,
Yeah.
because the person that's going through it, even I mean, I was different than everybody in my household. I was grieving and they weren't.
Yeah.
Even my girls who were involved in the accident with me, they were having a different response and um, reacting in a different way as well. So
Yeah. One of the parts of your story that I thought was so powerful is when you described coming downstairs and your family wanted to be with you, and that surprised you.
I was
And
in so much shock. Yeah.
yeah, you were just trying to figure that out, and you decided, you know what, I have to fight this.
Right.
I have
Because
to.
I felt I had allowed the lie of the enemy to say they're better off without you.
Right.
Um, and or even just I'm not the same person. So why would they still want me cuz I'm different? Um, like obviously like this is the depression talking. This is all the
Yeah.
um and I was just shocked that they still wanted to see me, that they were happy to see me, that I felt like a dark cloud, but that was also the self-hate, just suddenly hating yourself and hating what you did and feeling like you can't make it better.
Yeah,
It feels very hopeless. Yeah.
that's the weight of guilt, right?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
feeling bad. So dealing with that. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so I didn't know that there were PTSD certifications. So that's good to know. So that's if that's something friends you're dealing with, look for.
Yeah. Ironically, people who work best for people like us are people who also work closely with like law enforcement
Mm.
or soldiers, um, surviving that type of trauma. We're right there kind of with them, which is crazy, isn't it? I mean, um, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the reality because it's all neurological. It's moral injury. So moral injury usually relates to people who have to protect others and have to make very quick decisions where your actual soul. I mean, I think it's even described back in like medieval times. My friend is writing a book about moral injury. His name is David Peters. He has a great book out called something about, has to do with war. So he's a pastor who served over in Afghanistan, and he's actually a caddy as well. He had an accident before going off to war. And so he was dealing with all these different feelings and emotions. And he started writing this book about war, the reality of war, and being a chaplain to other soldiers, and kind of starting to talk about the moral injury. And I went to some help and realized that his real underlying trauma, was the accident where he hit a motorcyclist.
Wow.
And he never dealt with it. Yeah. So that was more traumatic than being a chaplain in Afghanistan.
That's got to be very hard. Okay, I wanted to ask you one other question. So,
okay.
Or actually, I have two other questions. So, Crystal Prophet, who was at the conference,
yes.
she asked, she said, what helps people feel comfortable to share their most vulnerable parts of your story? So, you can think about that. I think, because that was one of the things that I think came out in your story, is you had this, I don't know what the word is, this sort of
epiphany,
this habit of like saying, of trying to please people, right? And say, well, this is what people want. And then through your accident, you had to find, no, I have to be authentic, or else I can't keep going.
Couldn't keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I shut down for a long time and didn't talk to anyone. I wouldn't tell anybody what I was feeling completely. I wasn't completely honest. Wasn't honest with myself. I just knew that, because I didn't want to cause anybody more disappointment or pain. I was very angry that there weren't more stories like mine to where I could relate to. That made me upset, that I could search and search and search. And every time I tried to search information about people like me, I would get advertisements for lawyers. If you do a quick Google search of accident and fatality, not intentional, I would try and find people like myself. You get lawyers representing, we'll get you the most money for your wrongful death lawsuit. It was, or you get articles of people going to prison. It was not,
which is terrifying.
Very terrifying. Oh, it's a very real thing. These are things that everyday people who are law-abiding citizens, we don't have the capability, if we cause a death, like a malpractice lawsuit. People who are in the medical field, they're covered with insurance. We aren't. Regular, you and me, driving the speed limit, paying attention to the stop sign, going down the road, we are not equipped. Yet our cars are loaded weapons. Right. Our cars are licensed to kill. We have to treat it so carefully, and we don't understand that, where you can follow the law. If there had been a different 12 people sitting in that juror seats, I very well could have gone to prison. This happens to people that I meet who are like, how am I so much different than they are? It depends on the people who are sitting and weighing that information, and it could still be like, well, Jennifer, you know what? You should have inched past that tree. You did not have the right of way, and I would have gone to trial, and trial would have been $35,000-$40,000 that we didn't have. So then the DA might have offered me some really nice plea deal, and innocent people every day take those plea deals. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a reality that I never knew. That's a whole other conversation. Yeah. But really why I started to share, I didn't share at first. I'm 3.5 years out now. 3 years and I think 6 months. Right at 6 months, I think. And I did not share for the first 6 months, really till the lawsuit was over, which would have been May. And I saw this opportunity to be in the New Yorker article, The Shame and the Sorrow of the Accidental Killer by Alice Gregory from the New Yorker. You can look up that article. It's a great article. But I was one of the 6 people interviewed for it. And talked with her, and I spilled everything in my soul to this person that did not know me. I told her every detail, every heartbreak on the floor of my closet, this lady from New York.
Wow.
And when I finished, the only other person in this world who had heard the entire, from the beginning to the end story was probably my counselor. But when I finished, we're both crying. And she said, "Jennifer, your story scares the hell out of me." She's so sweet. I actually got the opportunity to interview her on my
Oh,
show.
cool.
Yeah, you can go back and listen to what the responses she got. Out of all the articles she's ever done in her whole career, that one had the most feedback and shares and exposure.
Very nice.
Yeah, it really opened the dialogue. But when I came away out of that closet, I felt different, lighter. And really, that's what caused me to share. I jumped on a Facebook Live the day before I thought that article was going to be released, because I had signed over that my words were hers. I had no idea what was going to come out, what was going to be edited out.
Yeah.
Even though she had assured me that she was not going to spin it in a certain light to where caddies looked negatively, there's still that fear, you know? So I jumped on a Facebook Live, which I had never done before, and I shared publicly for the first time. And we were coming up, I don't know, 11 months from my accident, or not 11, more like 10. And I shared finally with friends and family. So my close circle knew I had been in this accident. The close circle knew I was struggling. They just didn't know completely to what degree, except for my counselor, which I had check-ins with him. He gave me his cell phone, talking with my other doctor, and the nurse, the nurse to my regular doctor, also would do regular check-ins with me. And that was my support system, where I felt like I could truly talk to them without having judgment, or they could keep it professional without causing them more pain. But they also would know who to go to if there was something serious enough, like where I needed to be, put into a facility for a little bit, or whatever. They had that. They had that experience and professionalism. So I found out telling my story freed me. It freed me from a little bit of the guilt and the shame. It took away some of the taboo, where I could own my story, and it put the power back on me, to where people whispered about me. There were rumors about me. People Google searched my name. And if I said my story, then I had the power again. And, the enemy couldn't whisper those things about me. There's nothing that anyone can now say about me that I haven't thought about myself, to be honest with you. There isn't anything that people could accuse me of that I didn't once say and believe about myself. The horribleness of what I kind of put myself through, like, you're a monster, you're a killer, you're not worthy. All those things, I did that to myself. Trying to work to, even when I did that New Yorker article, I told her, I said, I don't forgive myself yet. I didn't know how I could do that. I do feel like I forgive myself now, but it's a daily choice. I still have to, still have to revisit things sometimes, and go back to, okay, whose voice am I listening to? And okay, what does God say? And things like that.
I was just thinking about one of my favorite parts of scripture is in Romans 8, where Paul at toward the end, he's giving all these questions, and he says, "Who can condemn? If God doesn't condemn us, who can condemn? Or if God is for us, who can condemn?" And the structure, you can't see it in English, but in Greek, the structure of that question is, it's assuming the answer. It's a rhetorical question saying nobody can. You
Mm.
think about that, right? So if nobody can condemn me, then that means my
That
parents
includes myself.
can
Yeah.
condemn me,
And
right?
that's hard. Hmm.
Exactly. So it's it, but that holding on to that truth is very, very difficult. What I love about what you've done is, my friend Mary Demuth says, an untold story never heals, right?
True.
And
I agree with that.
you've decided to start sharing your story. You saw that, hey, there nobody's telling these stories, and so you're telling these stories. And
Well, let me tell you and add to that.
okay,
So God had lined up a couple of things. I had two very specific prayers. One was that I would meet someone that knew David, and God provided with my neighbor. So literally, my neighbor of 2 years, next door neighbor, knew the man who I hit. I didn't know that until I had a garage sale to pay for my lawyer, and he comes up, and there was this whole thing where I got to confess to this man. It was my choice. I could have completely kept it inside, and it was so freeing. So I told someone that was his friend, "This is me. It's me. It was me." And then around when we were moving, so around May, I told my other neighbor, "Hey, we're moving." And really, what kind of I think might have been another level of healing, or just saving my, not saving me. I don't want to be so dramatic, but giving me permission to eventually share my story. I meet my neighbor and I say, "Hey, we're moving." And, "Oh, why are you moving?" And we're talking. And I said, "Well, after the accident, and there's a job offer to Waco. So we're moving." And, "Oh, I didn't know you were in an accident." And I realized I never told her because I was so ashamed. This is
wow,
my neighbor. And she's like, "Oh, honey, I didn't know that." And I was like, "Well, I didn't want to offend you. It was actually a really serious one. The man lost his life." And I started to cry a little bit.
mm,
And she said, "Why don't you come inside and have some coffee? I want you to talk to Johnny." Johnny was her husband. And they invite me in and give me coffee. And I sit down, and Johnny comes down the stairs and begins to tell me his story of 18 years ago, where he was driving home from work and hit a young lady that was 24 or early 20s, coming back from college. And he began to weep and shake. And he knew the day, he knew the time, he knew the day of the week. He gave me the details, and he just quivered. And this is like a 60-year-old man. And it had been 18 years. Um, and I had this realization that this was something that was lifelong. But how God answered my prayer that I would meet someone like me. So
mm,
God fulfilled a
wow,
prayer request in that moment. God gave me an example and a model. He prayed with me. He cried with me. He told me the first year was going to be the hardest. He let me know that every anniversary may be difficult. He told me to cling to my family, encouraged me not to drink. Just like different things that he learned, lessons he learned. So his vulnerability encouraged me, because that was my neighbor of 2 years. So one on each neighbor, God fulfilled this answer. I can't make that stuff up.
right,
So even in that in itself encouraged me that God was with me. He was taking care of me. And Johnny and I, even though we moved, we still keep in touch. And his wife, his sweet wife, and through Facebook. And I'm so grateful for them. And so then I had that opportunity with the New Yorker, and I realized, it's not about me sharing my story for the one lost sheep, for the needle in the haystack who happens to catch your show, or whoever else I'm a guest on goes, "Oh my gosh, I connect with that. Wait,
yeah,
me too." And And that was so healing and powerful for me that I pray I can do that for somebody else. And every time I hear somebody else's story too, I'm still just as encouraged. I mean, it's a full circle.
Yeah.
We're healing each other by having community.
Yeah. So I
So
hear
I hope I
lots of,
answered her question.
yeah, that's fantastic. I hear lots of things in there. One is God is really good, and He
He's
takes
so
care of you.
good.
He knew those people needed to be near you long before you did, right?
Right.
And
Right.
the other one is vulnerability is contagious.
Hmm.
If we share vulnerably, whatever we're going through, um, it has this effect of spreading community in a way that very few other things do. So we have to do it. I think that's the example we see in Acts 2. That when we look at the early church, they're
Hmm.
sharing together. They're not just sharing; they're sharing their food, they're sharing their stuff or whatever, but they're sharing their lives, and that's
Yeah.
really how the church became so viral, for lack of a better word, at the early part of
Right,
the
because people, the early, I mean, if you think people were asked not to talk about that, you knew.
yeah.
Look at the Bible. Throughout the whole Bible, we read the dirt of people. Like, it is a story of showing examples of the human flesh
Right.
over and over again. The ugliness of people who are still used by God, but yet have a past and have we fall short, and God still uses them, and they still made it into the greatest book in the world, and we still read about their stories, and we can still learn from their example. um and so we have to have, whether, and I think you have to be careful. I've learned to be careful with my vulnerability. I
Sure.
disconnect occasionally sometimes, where I know when I can, still learning how much to give at one time. It's heavy, it's my burden to bear, not everybody's. And
Yeah,
so,
I think there's a skill to that, to just knowing, when it's
trial and
appropriate.
error.
Yeah, yeah, right. But
Yeah.
that's not just true for stories like yours. It's true for everybody.
Yes, yes.
So learning that, yeah, is good. You may want to have, close friends, or when you're inviting, it's just like any relationship, right? You're inviting people into your story one piece at a time.
Right. Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Anyway, I love that. Jennifer, tell us where people can find you and find your podcast and your award-winning podcast.
Oh, you're so sweet. That's I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to that.
You
But
smile. You
thank
say
you.
thank
I
you. Yeah,
know.
that's good.
Okay, so you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Accidental Hope. I think it's accidental_hope on IG, and then Accidental Hope Facebook page. I'm actually redoing a website. I did have a blog, mybeautifulybroken.com, but you can still, it's up for another 30 days. I'm actually going to try and make it all make sense, so it'll all be aligned to Accidental Hope
Cool.
here in the next few weeks. So, but I'm on iTunes or Google Play, and you're welcome to message me if you have questions. Please share the Halfway There podcast with someone who may have had an accident with fatality or serious injury. I'd love to pray with them and meet with them and let them know the resources that are out there. There are very few, but there are some, including some books and other people who have come, forward with their story. So,
Yeah. No matter what you've been through, there are others, and it's never been easier to find them because of the internet. And I love how you're bringing your tribe together. So, Jennifer, thank you.
thank you,
Thanks for
Eric.
doing this. Thanks for sharing on the show and sharing it. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, you too. And y'all stay safe. Everybody stay safe. All
Yeah.
right.
Try not to get some weird virus.